What are the metrics and pieces of data that real live broadband marketers are looking at? That's what we'll be talking about on this episode of Store Connect Podcast. My name is Andy Johns, your host with Pioneer, and I'm joined on this episode by Tim Gilford of Lightstream. Tim, thanks so much for joining me.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for the invite, Andy.
You may hear some ambiance. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll know that we are somewhere different than usual, but we are at the NTCA Marketing and Sales Conference here in New Orleans, Louisiana, kind of the epicenter of broadband marketing in the United States this week. And as we always say on these live episodes, if you hear any extemporaneous sounds, it's not background noise, it's ambiance. So that's what we're going for, Tim.
And we love the ambiance and our friends in NTCA. They've done a great job here at the Marketing and Sales Conference, and New Orleans has been good to us.
It's a great spot. So, Tim, we just got off the stage. Full disclosure, Tim and I did a presentation on data this morning. It was called Data, or How to Use Data to Get Stuff Done or Not. And so we looked at using different pieces of data to decide, do we want to do this or not? And Tim, we broke it down into 4 different categories. So let's run through what those 4 categories are, and then get into some of the individuals. So we got satisfaction, and we're looking at our PowerPoint slides here. Satisfaction, billing, engagement, and operations. Let's start with satisfaction. The big one for y'all is the Net Promoter Score, right?
Yeah, the NPS and Net Promoter Score. It's that always question of, how much would you suggest this service to your friends or family or colleagues, right? It's 0 to 10. You've got your promoters, you've got detractors, and you want a higher score. You can be a negative 100 to 100 level with your end score here. So you want to track that. Our industry average has always been a bit low. It seems to be around 30 as a whole for telecommunications. Not great. There's always room for improvement in those, and you should be tracking your NPS, though. It's always that first kind of pulse on how are we doing right now.
I think that numbers will be kind of shocking for somebody, that the Net Promoter Score average for the broadband industry is 30. From what I've seen before, that's really pulled down by the satisfaction scores on a couple of really big providers. A lot of the small ones like Lightstream and others that are here that Pioneer works with, or here at the NTCA conference, y'all are the ones bringing it up. So that's good.
Yeah, we certainly try to. We're very proud. This year's score was an 80. It's been hanging around there for the last couple of years. We're pretty proud of that number. Hopefully a reflection that our customers, our members are pretty happy with our service. There are some bigger ones out there that may not have as much of a white glove experience.
And let's get into a little bit about the how for that survey. We didn't get into this on stage, but how do you guys go about collecting that Net Promoter Score from, or collecting the data that leads to that score?
Yeah, and there's a bunch of different ways that you can do this. Our best version is through our annual meeting. We are a cooperative, so we get to invite our members each year to our annual meeting, and we have an old school paper survey that we hand out. We've tried a few more technological ways to do that, and we found our demographic really likes the pen and paper. Some folks do, they'll email it, and there's some suppliers that we've even been introduced to here at the conference that have some abilities to do that, and you can really dive into some, more specifics of how that NPS is impacted as well, and where to go from that. And, in our session, we talked a lot about, what this stuff means and the next level of everything. It's, where have you been? Where are we going? And monitoring which direction your NPS is going is probably the most important piece of it.
The next thing we talked about when we were in satisfaction, the other surveys you guys do, and I like the one using the adjectives, because I think that's insightful. Reliability was or reliable, I guess. Reliability would be a noun. Reliable would be the adjective version. So, but those adjectives, I thought that was a key factor. Y'all are tracking what words they're using to describe the service.
We are, and we've kept them the same over time. And there's a positive bucket and there's a negative bucket, and there's some neutral in any of that. But being reliable, being arguably unique, useful, dependable. These are some of the adjectives that we've had in our survey for the last several years, and reliable is the one that we put a little bit more weight on. Again, we're Northwest Indiana. It's very rural. These folks, they depend on a reliable connection to be able to do the things, whether that's agriculture, education, telework, telemedicine, lots of usefulness, and we're happy to provide them.
I think the adjectives on some of those folks with more of a net promoter score of 30 might be different. Adjectives we don't want to use on a family-friendly podcast like Story Connect. So I'm glad that y'all are tracking those. So after we get past the satisfaction, the billing data is the other one, and you're looking at churn and also volatility is one, and those are a couple of the key ones that you said even at a board level they're looking at on a regular basis.
Yeah, I provide monthly data to my board, so they've got an idea of what's going on. We're keeping track of who's coming, who's going. It's a good one to know. Again, we talk about trends. If we're starting to downtick, we want to know. If we've got folks that are leaving, we want to know why. And more importantly, with that, the second level is it something that we can control? If they move out of our service area, that's not something that I can control. We have a specific footprint that they can be within. We've got folks that go on temporary service, so we know those customers are going to have an uptick in November.
Right.
When they leave for a few months, they come back in the spring, and we see them again. So there's a little bit of up and down with it, and knowing what that volatility is and the indicators for it, those are the pieces that we're trying to keep our finger on.
It's interesting if we move on to the next category, the engagement data. I think when people think about marketing data, most of that is what would go under the engagement category. We're talking about your social, your web stats, your email newsletters, all that kind of stuff. But it's good to me to see that that's not the only metrics that folks are looking at here. There were a lot of folks engaged in that satisfaction data, some of the network data, the operational, all of that. But of course, the bread and butter for marketing folks is a lot of that engagement data. And y'all are looking at it, whether it's social or any of the different pieces, you're monitoring that social media data pretty closely.
We are. Social media specifically, how we engage in a different manner. It's not necessarily our CSRs talking to one of our customers. This is an online presence. We want to know how many followers we've got, how many impressions. And again, we're trying to keep that engagement up, trying to stay connected with them, trying to bring them material. More importantly, we found the local material. Everybody loves to see our technicians on there.
Right.
It's humanizing us. We are the people, and our CSRs, they want to see that. They like the service anniversaries. That local content has become very relevant for us and really makes us a part of the community.
And what we're seeing is Facebook is still the 800-pound gorilla in the room. There's there've been other the reports of Facebook deaths have been greatly exaggerated. It's still the big one. And so to be able to look at that and see what other platforms, the example I used in the presentation, we know at Pioneer our content on Friday performs really well if it's on Facebook, but on LinkedIn it's Wednesday. That's the day that we get the most the most action on those posts. So that's the kind of thing to take a look at too, and see how the different platforms, people are using them differently.
It is, and you mentioned the significance of Facebook, and they have a nice built-in insights piece that it's going to tell you some of those numbers, and then the scheduling piece as well. When you go to put a post out, do encourage you to work in advance, schedule those. They're going to tell you some of those heat maps. 7:04 in the morning may not be as popular as 9:38 in the morning versus 4:07 p.m. It's very specific,
right.
But there's definitely some data there to suggest of how you're going to peak those posts.
The other things we looked at, and how it all works together, looking at that QR code data, looking at your web stats. We talked about heat mapping on websites to see where folks are clicking. The email newsletter data. I know you guys do email newsletters. Looking at what folks are clicking on. A lot of that stuff can really help you decide. We look at it on our podcast as well to see when folks are listening and which episodes perform well. So looking at all that, going back to the topic of the session, it can really help you decide. Yes, this is working. I'm going to do more of that. And no, this isn't working. I'm going to do less. It sounds simple, but it's important.
It is, and we want to identify some pieces of data so that we know where we've been, where we're going, things that we can do, and sometimes it's really important to know things that we don't want to do. And these data buckets they've all got some gray area to it, but each one of them gives us an indicator. And I know one of the emphasis we made today at the Marketing and Sales Conference is turning data into information and information into insights. Mm-hmm. We've got to be able to take that next step of why is it important? What can we do? How is this going to impact our decision making?
Last category is operational, and you're talking a lot about trouble tickets is kind of the key element that y'all are looking at from an operational standpoint.
It is your people or your resources, and identifying how your front office is spending their time, whether it's taking on new customers or what else are we looking at with that? How many administrative changes we're making. If you had an acquisition and you're trying to get new data into there, it's all relevant. And then in trouble tickets is definitely a more important topic these days. Again, we're going to use this word resources. So your truck rolls, your knock department, how we're going to resolve these. And in the end, it's not as much. Again, we've got some cooperative roots. It's not always about the dollars, but the experience the customer gets. So if you're able to resolve someone's problem within your office, that they're able to maybe reset a piece of equipment, they're able to correct that. That connectivity is up within a few minutes rather than having to deploy a truck and a technician and then start going down those other avenues. They do take a little bit longer. They are another expense that we have to evaluate, though.
Right.
Fortunately, those get resolved a lot quicker when we're able to do it through tech support and our in-house.
Definitely would rather go there, and like you said, important to kind of keep up with the trend lines for sure on that. Last thing I have for you, Tim, you are more of a data inclined person. We're both baseball guys. We will spare you the listeners from running through baseball stats and data. But I know from life before broadband marketing, data was a big part of just the way that you think and approach things. If there's somebody out there who's maybe less data inclined, somebody who's sitting there and isn't tracking a lot of these pieces and needs to do more, wants to do more, what advice would you have for them to get started and take those first few steps into paying closer attention to their data?
Yeah, I mean, evaluating this data can be a little bit overwhelming if you're trying to look at all of these 4 buckets. If you're starting at ground zero, there's definitely some places to look. Take a couple of them. Get used to the reports that you're able to run, pull that data. None of this stuff gets built overnight. So it does take a little bit of time to build it up. And each organization is going to look a little bit differently than the other. So even the metrics that we discussed today may not be for everyone. Right. But I do encourage people to start with that Net Promoter Score to get an idea of how their customers and members are perceiving them. That's definitely a good internal conversation for people to have. And because that survey can really identify a lot of either pain points and let's focus on the positives too. You may be doing a lot of things very, very well.
Right.
We definitely want to put some emphasis on our technicians. They are customer facing, our CSRs. Make sure they've got proper training, but start with a couple data points and don't worry so much about pulling every single one of them at the beginning. But it does keep you with a pulse on your organization, on your customers, and how they're perceiving your company.
And I think it's really smart to focus on that, whether you do it, whether Pioneer does it for you, but to get that Net Promoter Score as a baseline. Go ahead and get that so that if you've got marketing campaigns rolling out over the next couple of years, you'll be able to chart that not just on your sales data, but also on that satisfaction.
It is, and there's so many friendly people within NTCA. Ask questions.
Sure.
It's such a beneficial group of people, and at this particular conference, it's unique. It's like-minded people, right? And it's really helpful to be able to talk with people. So don't be afraid to ask questions and find some of those resources outside of your company as well.
He is Tim Gilford with Lightstream in Buffalo, Indiana. I am Andy Johns, your host with Pioneer. Until we talk again, keep telling your story.
Story Connect is produced by Pioneer Utility Resources, a communications cooperative that is built to share your story. Story Connect is engineered by Lucas Smith of Lucky Sound Studio.